Awesome. All right. So, Paige, I'm an alcoholic, and let's pick up where we left off last week, which is on page 26. So, if you have your book to hand, let's pop over to page 26. And what we're going to get into today is really learning about what our solution is, and we'll be able to do a lot of review of AA history, which, at least for me, is really excited. And if you're not joining me with the excitement and the enthusiasm, hold on. Hopefully we'll have some fun with it. All right, so top of page 26. You can make a note if you're writing in your book that this guy is Rowland Hazard. So it says, a certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. Man, what are we talking about? So there's this guy, Rowland Hazard. And what I want you to know about Rowland Hazard is he comes from a super, super wealthy American family. And he's a guy that has the ability to do well in life. He's got this common sense, and he's not a bad person. But we're going to see that he struggles with alcoholism. We're going to see that he's not unable to use that ability. He's not able to use that good sense, and he's not able to use his money or his character to stay away from that first drink. It says for years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. And whenever we see something like asylum or sanitarium in this book, we can either make a note either in our book or just mentally that says rehab. So he went from rehab to rehab to rehab. He went from treatment center to treatment center to treatment center, from detox to detox to detox. And when it says floundered, what that means is he relapsed every single time. And I can ask myself, see, I didn't go the rehab route, but a lot of the things that I tried to do to stay sober did not work. And I can look, is that my experience? Did I try a lot of things and did they not work? Did I continue to relapse? Am I somebody that went to rehab multiple times and relapsed every single time inevitably after? And he says he'd consulted the best known American psychiatrists. So this guy, Rowland Hazard, he has the money, he has the means, he's going to the best of the best of the best in the United States. And he's getting drunk. Again, what we're talking about there is that mental obsession. He has that insane thought that happens when he is sober, as all of us are today, that says this time will be different. I can drink again. And so he had then gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist, Dr. Jung. And so with this, Rowland Hazard, he goes to the best of the best of the best in the United States and relapse every single time. And now Rowland Hazard, he's got means, he's got money, he's got high character. He's like, that's it. I'm going to see the very, very best psychiatrist in the whole world. That's who I'm going to see to lick my problem. I'm going to see Sigmund Freud. And most of us, if we've done any sort of like school around psychology, it's like a Psych 101 class, your intro to psychology, or just, in modern culture, most of us have heard of Sigmund Freud. He's probably the most famous, well-known psychiatrist in all of history. And he's like, I'll go see that guy. And imagine being able to afford it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really have a fancy psychiatrist that maybe carries the same weight. I always think like Dr. Phil, but like not Dr. Phil. You know what I mean? Just like a famous, well-known psychiatrist. And by the grace of God, I was going to say Dr. Phil, not Dr. Phil, Sigmund Freud was not accepting new patients. By the grace of God, he didn't have any space for any new patients. He could not accept Rowland Hazard as a patient. So Rowland Hazard had to do that thing that many of us alcoholics have to do, which is settle. He had to settle for his second choice, Carl Jung. And if you know anything about Carl Jung, he's probably the second most famous psychiatrist in the whole world. And I just love that idea, because we're going to talk about the miracle that is him not getting what he wants. But time after time after time, how often has my spiritual awakening, how often has my spiritual experience begun with me not getting what I wanted. And how often has it begun with me not getting the thing that I thought I absolutely needed? And isn't that always, at least for me, that's proved to be the case. And so he's got to slum it with this guy, Carl Jung, who is an incredibly world-renowned psychiatrist, and whose ideas have really shaped our modern culture in many ways. So he's this influential guy. And it says, who prescribed for him? So Rowland Hazard actually has to go and travel to Switzerland and work with Carl Jung intensively, one-on-one for about a year. And so he's working with this guy. Imagine, like, this is expensive. I'm really emphasizing that because, like, man, I can throw all this stuff at my alcoholism, but no human power is sufficient to, at least to keep me sober. And we'll find, sorry, I don't mean to spoil it, but like, or for Rowland Hazard. So he works one-on-one with Carl Jung for a year. And it's as though experience had made him skeptical. So his relapsing in and out of treatment and rehabs and the best doctors, that experience made him like, I don't know if this thing could work for me. That's what it means when it says, though experience had made him skeptical. He finished his treatment with unusual confidence. I can always look at my experience. Hey, have I ever finished, again, I didn't go to rehab, but have we ever finished rehab with unusual confidence? I know I did a lot of therapy, a lot of counseling. Now, there's nothing wrong with rehab, nothing wrong with therapy, nothing wrong with counseling. Have I ever finished any of those with some unusual confidence? And then how did that go? I will just say in my experience, not well. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Hey, maybe I have an answer to this thing. Above all, he believed that he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. And so what we're seeing here is our homeboy, our homie, our friend, our pal, Rowland Hazard. What he has is he has self-knowledge. He knows himself. He knows the things that, affect him. He knows, he's worked through a lot of his childhood issues. He's worked through some traumatic events. He's done a lot of this self-work, this self-knowledge. And by the way, just for anyone that's popping in late, we're on page 26, really the first full paragraph still. So you haven't missed too much. We're talking about our friend Rowland Hazard. So he knows himself so well. And one of the themes that we are really, really going to get into in the next chapter is self-knowledge avails us nothing. Me knowing my alcoholism won't keep me sober. Me knowing I'm an alcoholic won't keep me sober. Heck, even conceding to my innermost self that I have alcoholism, it's a wonderful start, but it will not keep me sober. So he's got this self-knowledge, but he thinks relapse is unthinkable. There is absolutely no way. I acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of my mind, its hidden springs. There is no way I will pick up a drink. There is no way I will ever relapse. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time, right? Yeah. And I mean, the story goes that he drank on his way back to the United States. Right. And so didn't even make it back all the way across the pond, stopped off in France and took a drink. Right. And imagine a year of intensive one-on-one psychotherapy with one of the best in the world. And he picked up again and he drank again. That is the power of alcoholism. And it says, more baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. He had no idea why he relapsed. And I know what it's like for me when I've come to kind of that morning after and be like, why the heck? And I didn't use the word heck, but why the heck did I do that? I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to, and yet I did anyways. And so it says, so he returned to this doctor whom he admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. Now, keep in mind, this is occurring, I believe, in 1931, although there is some argument as to whether this happened in 31 or I believe in 28. So I can be wrong. My sponsor tells me that quite regularly. I can be wrong. But regardless, in that time, not every house had telephones. We sure as heck didn't have the internet, so he couldn't send Carl Jung an email and be like, dude, what the heck? He maybe could have written a letter or a telegram, but very likely, and how it's written, he had to go back to Switzerland and be like, Rowland had to be like, Dr. Carl Jung, what the heck happened? What the heck happened? So he returned to the doctor whom he had admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. I want to point this out. He wished above all things to regain self-control. This was something he wanted more than anything else. And for those who just joined us, we're on page 26. I'm glad you're here. Welcome. This is something he wanted more than anything else. And so oftentimes when we relapse or we're working with people who relapse, I just want to emphasize it's not about not wanting it enough. It is about a disease that is more powerful than my human power. And it says, in the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. And if you've been with us a while in this study, you know that I always emphasize hopeless. Because when I can come to the end of myself and I can see the hopelessness of my situation as an alcoholic, I'm able to accept the hope that is on offer. And so it sounds like bad news, but there's good news coming. And so in this book, it emphasizes hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. So in the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. And could you imagine being probably the second most famous psychiatrist in the whole world? A man who is world renowned, a man who is known throughout history and time for his work in psychology and psychiatry, and to say, you're hopeless. Man, that is some real humility that Carl Jung had, to say, I can't fix you. And then to also not be like, no, I can fix you. Let me keep charging you money for it. You know what I mean? Like, impeccable morals. I'll throw that out there. That's just my opinion. I don't know. So he wished above all things to regain self-control. Oh, sorry. In the doctor's judgment, I realized I got our spot wrong. So he returned to this doctor whom he admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems. And I can look at myself and my life, and there are areas in my life where I am well balanced, where I'm able to make logical and rational decisions. There are areas in my life where I have self-control. Yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? And when we talk about that lack of control quite regularly, what we're talking about is that physical allergy. So it says he begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. So that's going back to where I accidentally skipped ahead from. He was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. And I don't know about you guys, but when I first read this, I'm like, whoa, that's some tough news, Rowland. Sorry, bud. Like, I'm sorry that's your predicament, right? But if I turn the page and go to the very bottom paragraph of page 24, it says, when this sort of thinking, and what we're talking about at the bottom of page 24 is the mental obsession, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, to be an individual with alcoholic tendencies, what that means is I've got the physical allergy. So if I've got the mental obsession, that insane thought that tells me I can drink again, when I'm sober and I have that experience where once I take a drink, I need another and need another and need another, I have probably placed myself beyond human aid. And unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. And see, I would read that and I'd be like, ooh, that's some tough news, Rowland. But the reality is, ooh, that is some tough news, Paige. That is my reality. That is my predicament as an alcoholic today. And I don't, oh, let me be quite honest with you guys. I do not have the bank account that Rowland has. So I cannot afford a bodyguard, and I don't even think I could afford a real, inexpensive institution. Like, I think that's out of budget for me, you guys, right? So the reality is, if I can relate to the mental obsession and I can relate to the allergy, the doctor's opinion, and by this, I mean Dr. Carl Jung's opinion, which very closely mirrors Dr. Silkworth's opinion. I am hopeless, and I am in a position where I am beyond human aid. Now, again, we focus on the hopeless, and then we get to the hope. And this next paragraph is where we begin to see the hope. And so one of the things is why the miracle is that Rowland Hazard didn't get what he wanted and was able to get what he needed is Dr. Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, they differed in a number of areas, a number of them in their fields. But for our purposes, the one main area where they differed that really matters is Dr. Sigmund Freud believed that all problems of the mind could be solved in and of the mind, that human power would be sufficient. Now, Carl Jung believed that there were certain conditions which required God's intervention, which required a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. And we're going to hear him read about these spiritual experiences. And I kind of like to pepper in a little bit more of the history. Woo, spicy. Some of you are like, pepper is not spicy, Paige. Fair enough. Fair. But there a number of years kind of before this happened, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud went to a psychiatry conference in the United States. And I want to be very, very clear that this is not exactly how it happened. This is how I am visualizing it in my brain. This is how my brain has concocted the visualization. So, but how I imagine is they show up to the conference and everybody's like, oh my, it's Freud. Ooh, Freud. And everyone's like swarming him and they want to ask him questions. And he's doing a little talk in a conference room and everyone's there and they're just like, Freud. I don't think this is how that really happened, but it's how I visualize it. And so how I visualize it is Carl Jung is off to the side and he's hanging out and there's a young American psychiatrist who comes and talks to him, and his name is William James, and William James and Carl Jung get to talking, and William James is telling Carl Jung all about these things called varieties of religious experiences. And Carl Jung was a spiritual man, and he had a belief in a power greater than himself. And so he was the natural person to sort of plant those seeds in. And again, that serendipity and that moment of God. And man, it's part of why I love AA history, is because when I ever struggle with faith or belief in a power greater than myself, I can look to our history and I can always say, man, if one of those things didn't happen exactly how it happened, I wouldn't be here. And so it's real hard for me to say there is no power greater than me, when I can look at the immensity of our history and the synchronicity of things coming together. And if a phone call here is missed, or a court date is a week later, like all of these things, we wouldn't be here. And so for me, I just see, how I like to say it is, I see God all over that. And so that is the hopelessness. And so the hope is that, but this man still lives. Rowland Hazard, bottom of page 26. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard. Oh, thank goodness, that's a little out of budget for me. Nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth. Anywhere on this earth. And we're going to see that is promised to us in step 12. Anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. And for me, that certain simple attitude is the remembering what my solution is. And that is the God of my understanding keeps me sober. That is the attitude for me, right? That if I remember that and I continue to act towards that, that is the attitude that I need. And I love this book, because this book always meets me where I'm at. See, sometimes I think I got to get perfect to be in this book, or I've got to get perfect to do the steps. No, the book meets me at my resistance. The book meets me at my imperfection. And I truly believe that's where God meets me too. Because the next line says, some of our readers may think they can do without spiritual help. If I'm here and you're listening to me talking about God and you're like, oh, I don't know about that. It's yes, I hear you. The book hears you. Yes, we might be resistant to it. And it says, let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. So it says the doctor said, so this is Carl Jung again telling this to Rowland Hazard. He said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. And again, when we're talking about the mind, I really believe we're talking about that mental obsession, that inability to set it down and not pick it up again. And he says, I have never seen, Carl Jung's probably seen a lot of things. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. I've never seen one single case recover. Again, that hopelessness. And in that moment, it says our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. That hopelessness. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Now what we're going to read is a description of what a spiritual awakening or what a spiritual experience is. And if you've kind of been with me through this study, you know that I'm a little bit I'm a little bit of like a petulant child, where I'm like, I'm going to avoid going to the spiritual appendices. I always love finding, and we will, I promise you guys, we'll do it, and we agnostics will get there. But I always love finding all the different descriptions of the spiritual awakening, of the spiritual experience as we go through this text. And so we have one right here. So if we're writing in our book, we can make a note that this is what we're talking about. It says, here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. That is our solution. Vital means life-giving, and a spiritual experience, that's our solution. And what's really, really powerful about that is this is that time in history where we now, like, we don't know, but this moment, Carl Jung is going to give to Rowland Hazard that critical piece of information of what our solution is. And so vital spiritual experiences, life-giving spiritual experiences. It says, to me, these occurrences are phenomena, which is something we don't fully understand and we can't fully explain, and it would be difficult to replicate. I say, and then also with an asterisk, we do have a way to replicate it. And I might be burying the lead a little bit, but it would be the steps. That's how the steps is how we replicate it. But the phenomena, like this thing that I can't explain, it, you know, it says they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And what does that look like? For me, that was the definition of a spiritual experience that when I was new, it made the most sense to me. What it looks like for me is I show up to life in one way. I show up to life seeing the world through this certain lens and having these beliefs and operating in a certain way. And very quickly, does that lens change? Do my beliefs change? Do my motives change? and I seem to show up in a new way. I see the world in a new way. The way in which I want to show up to you, to life, and to my fellows is new and different. And it's not something I experienced before. And again, I emphasize suddenly, not that it has to be a bolt of lightning, but suddenly because it does not take long to get well. And it does not take long to have this spiritual experience. So the way in which I lived my life, the way in which I showed up to life, the fears, the pains, the self-centeredness that I didn't think I had, it suddenly leaves. And I show up with a whole new one. And what I love about that is where it talks about displacements and rearrangements. It's not something that I could have done on my own. And it's one of those things when I've really experienced it, I know I didn't do it. I know it was done to me. And this is kind of a bit of a tangent, but we're doing actually really good for time. I'm surprised. So I figure we can just bear with me with a little tangent. One of the things is I'm a really, really big believer that the spiritual awakening is a gift. And what I mean by that is I do not earn it, and I did not deserve it, and I did not become worthy of it. But this is a big book study. I have a feeling we might have a big book nerd or two, or maybe, 24 in here. And you might be like, hold on, Paige, a gift? Excuse me, I don't know if you're aware, but in Bill's story, it said a price had to be paid. What gift is paid for, Paige? Fair enough, yes. But the price that is paid is destruction of self-centeredness. And I don't know about you guys, but the price that I paid to receive the gift is really letting go of that, which I didn't need at all. Right? In paying the price, I'm receiving an overabundance of that gift. And so for me, how I visualize this thing being, these 12 steps out of this book, following these directions. See, I don't see it like climbing this ladder of success and becoming worthy and earning. And no, I see it a lot like waking up on Christmas morning. See, when I wake up on Christmas morning, down the stairs, and I do mean down the stairs, there's that Christmas tree. And underneath is a gift. And it's already wrapped. And it already has my name on it. It's already there. It is mine. It is for me. Now, if I stay in bed, I'm not going to get that gift. I do have to take some action. I do have to go down those stairs, take those steps, and then I can receive and open the gift. But it was already there, and I didn't earn it, and I didn't deserve it, and I didn't become worthy of it. It's there for me. And I say that for anyone who is here who has not experienced it yet, or, one of the barriers that I had to this thing was this depth of sense that I was inherently bad and wrong and unworthy and unlovable, and I didn't deserve what you guys had. And that's kind of the kicker. None of us do. And yet we get the gift anyways. Whether I take it, only in my experience, if I take these actions, because I got to go down those stairs and open that gift. And so, just to reiterate, to bring us back from my little tangent, these vital spiritual experiences, that they appear to be the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangements within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employ are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. So Dr. Carl Jung was like, yeah, I was trying to give you one, but I couldn't do it. And for some reason, I'm not able to just give this thing to you. Now, upon hearing this, our friend Rowland Hazard was somewhat relieved. Oh boy, that's good news. After all, he was a good church member. He's like, okay, I've got some religious beliefs. It'll be okay. This hope, however, was destroyed. So again, sometimes hopelessness really is the best thing for us. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, It's good that you have a belief, because that, you know what I mean? You're not completely close to this idea of a higher power. Absolutely. In his case, they did not spell the necessary, vital spiritual experience. And so what Carl Jung told Rowland Hazard was, he probably didn't say dude, but I'm going to say dude, was like, dude, the odds of this thing happening to you are the odds of you getting struck by lightning. You cannot absolutely not be hanging out in a church pew somewhere and hope this thing happens for you. You've got to go out and seek it. And so Rowland Hazard, armed with that information, knowing that if he does not have a spiritual experience, he's going to continue relapsing. And he goes and he gets involved with an organization called the Oxford Group, or the Oxford Movement. Now, the Oxford Movement, I want to be very, very, very clear, had nothing to do with alcoholism, nothing to do with not drinking, nothing to do with any of that at all. Their whole deal was about having a deeper experience and a deeper relationship with the God of their understanding. And I say it in that way because they happen to be a Christian organization. And so Rowland Hazard's like, hey, they're all about having a deeper experience of God. I need one of those with some urgency. You know what I mean? Like, I gotta have one of those. So he gets involved in the Oxford Movement. And the Oxford Movement had a number of tenets. They had the 4 absolutes. They had I believe it was the 5 C's. And they had these principles that were later adopted into what we know as our 12 steps. And essentially their idea was surrender, confession, like sharing the things that we had done, restitution, which would be making amends, continued dependence and reliance upon God, and helpfulness to others, working with others. So we see these ideas of where these 12 steps came from. And so in that moment, Rowland Hazard, knowing that, hey, if I don't do something, I'm going to relapse, he's got some impetus, he's got some urgency, he works the steps, and he's able to stay sober. And one of the things that I find really interesting about Rowland Hazard is, from my understanding, and again, I can be wrong, he wasn't really convinced he could stay sober for very long. His whole motivation for getting involved in the Oxford Group and giving that thing a try was with the hope that he could give his mom a few happy memories before he inevitably died of alcoholism. And the message that I take from that part of the story is that the steps, it doesn't matter what I do the steps. My motive in doing this, I don't need to have perfect motives in doing the steps. I can think the steps might not work for me. I can think the steps are stupid. I can think that this page is nattering on for almost an hour, like that she's out of her mind. There's no way the steps could work for me. And yet, if I do them, I get well, right? What matters is the actions that I take, not what I think about the actions other people are taking, but the actions that I do take. And so Rowland Hazard, he now has knowledge of what I will do is I have a little infographic that I'm just going to share on the screen because it can help make it a little more visual. Let me know if you guys can see that okay. Awesome. So we have Rowland Hazard, and he met one-on-one with Dr. Carl Jung. And from that, he learned what our solution is in Alcoholics Anonymous. The solution that we have in these 12 steps is a spiritual awakening. He learned that. And then, okay, I've got to go find a spiritual awakening. I've got to go find a spiritual experience. And he gets in contact with the Oxford Group. And where he, here, I can make it a little bigger if you need. There, oh, is that, let me know if that's better. So he goes and gets in contact and he works the steps out of the Oxford Group and he has that experience and he stays sober despite not knowing or not believing that he could. And he stays sober. Now, a big part of the Oxford Group was going out and testifying and sharing that with others. And he goes and this is one of those things where, man, I see God all over this. Is he was summering in Vermont, again, because I feel like that's what rich people do. I don't know too much about Vermont, but I feel like rich people summer there. And so he was in town in Vermont, and and he was visiting, and he hears news that an old friend of his, Ebby Thatcher, was on trial. And he happened to be on trial the exact week that Rowland Hazard was visiting. And we can kind of read a bit about that experience on page 9, and it talks about how Ebby Thatcher was on trial. And Rowland Hazard shows up, and he shows up with Seba Graves, and he shows up with a gentleman by the name of Shep Cornell. And, you know, the thing is, the judge actually happened to be Seba Graves' father. And here's the thing. I have a feeling that gossip is not a new commodity or a new defective character. Gossip's pretty universal. Now, I'd imagine in a small town, very super rich Vermont, like they didn't have the Real Housewives of Vermont or whatever, but they probably knew all about Rowland Hazard's escapades and Rowland Hazard's drinking. And so Rowland Hazard, when he shows up in court with Seba Graves and for Ebby Thatcher, the judge said, for you, Rowland, I will let him go. Now he's got to be sober. He's got to be back here sober on Monday. Otherwise, he's going to be doing 6 months. And so it is one of those things. I wonder if they had not known about Rowland Hazard's escapades, about Rowland Hazard's drinking career, and had seen the change and knew that this was a different man. And again, I don't know if that's true, but I'll let you know, I've seen that happen in 12-step, and I've seen the change come over people. And I know what it's like to be in a meeting and hear somebody, and they might share a war story, and you're like, you did what? You don't look like you'd ever do that, right? And that is the power of this thing. But in that moment, Ebby Thatcher now, yeah, he's got a little bit of some pressure to work the steps because he doesn't want to go to jail for 6 months. So again, motives don't necessarily matter. So he works the steps. And he's got knowledge of what our solution is, which again is a spiritual awakening, and what our program of action is, which again is the 12 steps to get us to that spiritual awakening. And so he works the steps and he stays sober. And part of the program is he's got to share this message. And I don't think this is true at all. But I'm going to share this because I like to visualize it in this way. A lot of asterisks and fine print about this. But I always imagine that Ebby Thatcher, because he's doing it to get out of jail. He's like, man, I don't want to go testify. Who's the most fall down failure of a complete drunk? I'll show up and he'll be so hammered he won't even know that I was there. You know what I mean? Who can I because again, it had nothing to do with alcoholism, but he's like, I'll work with a drunk because that drunk won't remember me and it won't be so embarrassing. Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I just visualize it in that way. So he goes and carries that message to our intrepid co-founder, Bill Wilson. And he carries the message of, Bill, the solution I found is the spiritual awakening. And I found a way to have that. And that is through this program of action, the 12 steps. Now, Bill Wilson, why he's important is he is the first person to have knowledge of our problem, our solution, and our program of action. So prior to this, Bill Wilson, he had gone to the town's hospital 2 separate times where he worked with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Silkworth. And Dr. Silkworth, he gave us knowledge of our problem. Dr. Silkworth, he was in New York City and he worked at this place called the Town's Hospital, which specialized in alcoholism and drug addiction. And in his career, he worked with something like 50,000 different alcoholics and different drug addicts. And he learned that alcoholics, what we have is an illness that has a physical allergy. And for those that are new here, for those who have maybe just joined us today, that physical allergy is that thing that happens once I start to drink, where I need more and I need more and I need more, and I have the inability to control the amount I take. And that we have this mental obsession, this insane thought that when I'm as sober as I am today, that tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll go for 3 drinks. It tells me whatever lie it needs me to believe to take that next drink. And I'm stuck in this hopeless position where I can't drink and I can't stay sober. And Dr. Silkworth doesn't necessarily say verbatim that hey, these guys have a spiritual malady, but Dr. Silkworth does say they do seem a little restless, irritable, discontent when they're sober. So I really believe that that is what fuels our mental obsession. And so Bill Wilson has the knowledge of what our problem is, which is a physical allergy and a mental obsession, which fueled by our spiritual malady, our solution, which is a spiritual awakening and a program of action, a way to go from the hopelessness of our problem to the hope in our solution. So that's the little infographic, and we can go right back to the book. So let's flip the page and go to page 28. And it says, here was the terrible dilemma, right? In which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, again, a spiritual experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. A free man. And that is the thing. There is freedom on offer here. A lot of times in the studies we go through, we talk about recovered, and we talk about that freedom from the mental obsession. That is real, and that can happen for us. But again, I got to do some work. It says, we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. And I absolutely love that metaphor, because it is so powerful. And I don't know about what your alcoholism was, what your disease looked like for you, but I'll tell you what mine looked like. It really felt like I was drowning. And it's like this powerful current. Like imagine a river at flood, and it's just taking me. And I can't stop it, and I can't control it. And I'm grasping onto everything that I can, and I'm being knocked against a rock and another rock, and I'm drowning. And that's what it was like for me. And I remember very vividly where my disease took me was to homelessness. And again, that does not make me an alcoholic. It definitely makes me a poor roommate, but it did lead me to homelessness. And I remember a friend of mine, she took me out to eat, and she was like, what? She was just baffled, as baffled by it as I was. And she's like, what is your life like? Like, what is going on for you? And the only words that I could put to it, I was like, it is like I'm drowning. And all I could visualize it as was being in the middle of the ocean, and I was drowning, and there was nothing I could grab onto. And then it seems what seemed at first a flimsy reed. See, I come to these meetings and I see you guys, and you seem happy and sober at the same time, and you're talking about this God stuff, and you're talking about these steps, and that seems like a flimsy reed. It seems like I'm going to grab a hold of that reed, and it's just going to pull right out of the riverbed and come along with me, and it's doomed and hopelessness. And how could that help? And at what seems at first a flimsy reed. So it does not matter if I believe that this thing is a flimsy reed. It doesn't matter if I don't think it'll work for me. But if I dive in and grab a hold of these steps, grab a hold of these actions, it has proved to be a loving and powerful hand of God. And man, I just love that. This thing that feels so insecure, so flimsy, like it's just going to pull out of the riverbed, turns into God's hand, where I'm safely and securely pulled out to safety, safe and secure. And I probably say this about every metaphor in the book, but one of my absolute favorite metaphors in this book is that idea of God's hands. And we see it in a number of places, and we see it on page 100. It's one of my favorite promises, where it talks about the things that came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands. We're better than anything we could have imagined. And it's one of those things, I don't know about you guys, but I have been described at times as a handful. That is how I've been described. And perhaps I was a handful because I was meant to be in God's hands. And I just love that metaphor. And it actually ties in so well. So my hope is to go through this book and to go through the full 164 pages, because I really love the later chapters, and I have such a love for those later chapters. But in Two Employers, it talks about how there's this gentleman, and he's in this town, which is likely Hackettsville, New Jersey, and he was reaching out, and basically it talks about how him carrying the message there will possibly take many people out of that stream of misery. And that was the stream, that was the current, that was the tide that I was in of misery. And so not only do I get to go out of that stream safely on the riverbed, but I get to be a part of helping others get to safety as well. And that is a beautiful, beautiful gift. It says a new life has been given us, or if you prefer, because if you're like, I don't like that one, that's okay, we've got some options, we'll meet you where you're at. A design for living that really works. And you might have more umbrage with design for living, because the design for living, guys, that's a way of life. That means I can't set it and forget it. Man, that means I gotta keep doing this thing, which means I get to keep doing this thing that I'm never done. The distinguished American psychologist, William James, we were just talking about that guy. In his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, we're just talking about that, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. And so his book, now I haven't read it, but I've heard it's quite dense and quite wordy. So, I mean, it sounds like something I would try and give a good go to, and probably not get very far with, but I do like my wordy books. But I have given up a lot of my windy arguments. That's a big book joke for anyway. But it's set up a lot like this one, where it has information and then it has stories. And in the story sections, it gives examples of a whole number of different types of spiritual awakenings or religious experiences. And what I love is the humility that we see. It says, we have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all. And what I love about this is our experience. It's not saying, hey, this is our belief and this is our doctrine, this is our thing. No, if what we have learned and felt and seen, this is our experience. If that means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator, with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms, as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. All that is being asked of me is to try. And how do I try? Well, for me, it's as simple as I do the steps. I take those actions and I continue to take them on a daily basis. And for me, I really have a relational view of my relationship with God. And if you don't, that's okay. I'm wrong. You're right. And how I look at it is I look at it as if I was in a relationship with anyone, right? Would I feel intimate? Would I feel connected with that person based on the effort that I am putting into the relationship? If I don't talk to you for 4 months, or if you've been trying to get a hold of me and I've been ignoring your calls, if I haven't spent any time with you, if I haven't connected, if I've got these barriers in between us, I'm not going to feel that connectedness. I'm not going to feel that intimacy. Now, if on a daily basis, what I'm doing is I'm clearing away those walls. If I'm showing up openly, if I'm talking, if I'm listening, if I'm inviting, if I'm including, if I'm seeking that relationship with consistency, I'll feel that connectedness. And so it says, those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There's no friction among us over such matters. What I love about that is it doesn't matter. And like, I don't mean it in a dismissive, it does not matter, our religious beliefs. I mean it in a sense of if it is truth, it is truth. And this is at least my experience. If it is truth, it can be found in any healthy spirituality. and that we can come here and we can have a whole variety of religious beliefs or customs or traditions. And this way of life does not act in opposition to, but with healthy spirituality, it flows with, and it enhances and it deepens. And that tells me the universal truth that is in this book and these 12 steps, that I can practice it anywhere in the world, regardless of religious beliefs or wherever, and it still holds true. There's something really powerful in that. And at least for me, that tells me it comes from God. And it says there's no friction. There's no friction among us over such matters. It says we think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. That's fine, right? It says this should be an entirely personal affair, which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. We have the freedom to grow and develop in or believe whatever we want. And we're really going to get into that in 2 chapters in We Agnostics, that your own belief is enough. Your own conception is enough. There's no one's going to argue. It's enough. And it says not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. And keep in mind, those of us, again, I need to always be rooted and grounded in this book and these 12 steps. But a lot of what I like to do is to continue to seek and to continue to grow. And again, always grounded in this work. And if I wanted to connect with people, and like, let's say I'm a lone alcoholic in the world and all I have is a copy of this book. See, that was the purpose of this book, to just carry this message. And I'm going to work with other alcoholics and I'm going to carry this message. But if I wanted to kind of learn from the experience of people who are further along the path, well, if I live in Calgary, Alberta in the 1940s, where would I go? Well, at that time, I probably would go to church, because where else would there be to go? And nowadays, there's a whole variety of places we can go to grow, to seek, to learn. Always rooted and grounded in this work and these steps, but also you don't have to. You don't have to. But I just wanted to contextualize what it was saying there. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who were once in this class are now among our membership. Strangely enough, we find that such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Again, what I believe is far secondary to what I do. Further on, clear-cut directions are given. And that's a big reason why I like going line by line, so we can take and follow those clear-cut directions, showing how we recovered. Again, recovered does not mean cured, but what recovered does mean is the mental obsession has lifted. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. And that's the thing, these stories in the back of our book are meant to essentially 12-step us. In the sense of, if again, I was a lone member in Calgary, Alberta with just a copy of this book, and I don't know a single other sober alcoholic, I want to read those stories and be able to relate and to think that, yes, maybe this could happen to me. And in modern days, of course, we still have the stories, but we also see this in meetings. And for me, I feel like this is a call to what I'm meant to do at meetings. Part of what I'm meant to do at meetings, there's a lot, I have responsibilities, but each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view, the way he established his relationship with God. So the actions that I took to have a spiritual awakening. Thank you so much, and I'm so glad you came. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. We hope that no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages. And we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. All right, we'll leave it there.